Dal is my lifeline. I can't live without it, really. I love Toronto. I think it's a kind of kinder, cozier, friendlier version of the very exciting and big bad city that I live in, which is New York City. No, I'm being, facetious. I'm a seafood fan. I love that stuff. Good pizza, I love. And I think, weirdly, there's a kind of protein and coffee shake combo in New York now that I find myself seeking everywhere that I go in the world, because I'm like, I will get my coffee and my protein and my sugar all in one place. So like, it just makes one meal out of it, whereas otherwise I'm going to be like pilfering those things throughout the day and kind of, asking people for like energy bars. My favorite sort of food destinations are, well, Jackson Heights in New York City. And I've been recently, and it's become a little strange for me, because every time now I go to Jackson Heights, my song Pasoori is playing everywhere, and like every third or fourth restaurant I pass is like playing Pasoori, and I'm like, I cannot both eat food and listen to my new song. It just makes me, it's two parts of my brain, different parts of my brain. But Jackson Heights in New York City, and I think East London when I'm there. Yeah, today Kadai Boys was fantastic in downtown. I loved it. I love Toronto. I think it's a kind of kinder, cozier, friendlier version of the very exciting and big bad city that I live in, which is New York City. No, I'm being, facetious. The food here is great. The desi food is especially wonderful. I just went to Kadai Boys today, which had fantastic, wonderful food. I like the parks, and I like downtown. I think it's the difference really is that before Pasoori, I think I was perceived as a maker of and a performer of sort of desi classical music and semi-classical music. So sort of things that feel more traditional, old school, mellow, mid to low tempo, artisanal stuff, elevated stuff. Stuff for aunties and uncles, like that. I mean, I've heard all of this in my years, and I was kind of like, I think last year when I think I went to have like my tooth checked out, and the dentist was like, yeah, this happens with age, and I was like, age? What do you mean? Who, me? And then I was like, where's my like young person banger? I need at least one before I have my wisdom tooth extracted. This is one of the many things that happened during the pandemic in my life, which just forced me to be like, come on, you can do this. So yeah, I think I'm a great fan of house music, especially of what is called IDM, intelligent dance music, sort of more philosophical, trippy, long form, beats-based music. And I listen to it quite. I think I'm a serious listener of that sort of music. And so I thought, why not like try to make a song that combines some of that folksy Punjabi melody that I'm apparently specializing in with some of this other stuff that's a part of my life as a listener of music, but that I haven't yet brought into my repertoire as a musician. And I was lucky because I got to work with Abdullah Siddiqui, who's a wonderful prodigy, who's basically a kid, but like all brilliant kids these days, just, is a master as well as a kid. And Abdullah Siddiqui devised the kind of made the soundscape for this song. And so I think that was the really thrilling part. So once that happened, I think once Pasoori appeared and the thing that has been most encouraging is that I haven't lost my older fans. I think they still feel that there's enough of like a traditional folksy melodic kind of thread in the song that they can connect to. But I've also gained a huge number of younger listeners, it turns out, according to Spotify. I just looked at my artist data today, and it was like, yeah, most of my fans are between the ages of 18 and 23. And I was like, I cannot believe it. And I was like, okay, good. This is good. Here we come.
Did something happen to you?
No, why? Did you hear something?
Come on out. What does it feel like?
Cosmic.
I really enjoyed Miss Marvel. I went to a special screening in New York because Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, who directed some of the episodes, is a friend of mine. And she kindly invited me, and I went to see the two episodes in a movie theater in New York, and I was in tears. That never happens when I'm watching a superhero movie. Actually, no, on a plane it always happens because apparently the oxygen is lower or whatever. But I really liked it, Miss Marvel. I really appreciated all the kind of subtle ways in which, it wasn't just surface level gesturing at the events of South Asian life or like, oh, this is the map of South Asian culture, check. It was a very interesting philosophical engagement with where the trauma lies, and also how the site of pain can also be the site of power. That if you can connect with kind of ancestral memory, if you can tap into it, it can be a source of enormous power. Not just this kind of cosmetic, like performative, like culture pride of being like, I am representing, #representing. No, it's more than that. It's like, what is this story telling us about humanity? How is this a universal human experience? And I think that's the part that I most appreciated, that it turned kind of, in some ways, the very singular trauma of the partition into this very relatable, accessible, universal story about love. And then connected that with I don't want to give the plot away for those who haven't seen it, but connected that with other concepts that you find in the superhero sort of world. And to see Pasoori featured in it was very nice. I'm just so happy. I feel it belongs there. It belongs there. It definitely took a lot of like mutant powers to create Pasoori, so why not have it be in Miss Marvel? Identity, especially inherited identity. I think the most exciting way to engage with that, for me, has always been to engage with a craft that is rooted in a time and a place, and in a kind of philosophical, theological perspective, as opposed to either ritual or dogma, which is how I think, unfortunately, a lot of people present it. Like, are we defined by our prohibitions? Like, does Muslim identity mean like not having pork and not drinking wine? Like, is that it? Or is it like Qawwali and ghazal and, a certain kind of embroidery you find in Baghdad, and a certain kind of instrument that is played in Persia, and a certain kind. And so I think if you engage via craft, which is what I've always wanted to do, you first of all find, if you spend long enough in it, you find that Muslim identity or that, Hindu identity or whatever you're looking for. But then if you go deeper, it takes you into a place where that Muslim identity branches out into so many others. You see connections with Zoroastrianism, you see connections with Jainism, you see connections with ancient Jewish mysticism. You see sort of biblical connections. You see connections with the whole world. That's part of what excites me so much about the kind of pre-colonial world, which is, I think, where my musical practice is rooted, is that before the colonial encounter, we actually had a very multicultural, cosmopolitan sensibility in South Asia, especially. People were constantly coming from other parts and going out from South Asia, India, into the Near East, into Africa, beyond, into China. And I think that those multiple identities is not, for me, a modern thing. Like, my engagement with music has shown me that multiple identities is something we've been anciently comfortable with multiple identities. And that's my source. I'm giving you a very long answer for your very nice short question. But that's been my way, has been to go via craft and via, I think of tradition as best embodied in crafts and not as best embodied in orthodoxy, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does make a lot of sense.
I've thought a lot about this for myself also over the years. And I tell the kids this, and their parents are like, why do you bring our kids to this concert? He's corrupting our children. Oh my God. I think by charging more money, I'm not kidding, this is true. This is the first thing you have to do. You have to be like, I expect pizza at soundcheck. No, I only want tea at soundcheck. This is how pathetic I actually am. I'm like, can I have like chai? And they're like, yeah. You want some dessert? And I'm like, no. It's been an insane few months. Really wonderful, beautiful. I think, if anything, I feel like I now finally have the license to just do what I want to do. Which is kind of in some ways a paradoxical statement, because you would expect that if you have a big hit after being an indie artist, you would immediately change your accent and change your attire and be like, I am now a new person who has to fit the bill that I set up accidentally, but never mind. But that's not how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like, I perform this song that kids love. But I also do all this other stuff. And, I can, using the pretext or the excuse, the bahana, as we say in Hindi, Urdu, of Pasoori, I can use it as a Trojan horse and bring all this other stuff with it, which has always been my agenda, to kind of bring all my nerdy, geeky stuff into it via this banger. So I think that's what we did through the music video as well, and I think that's what I'm doing through this Pasoori tour that I'm on right now, is kind of using the Pasoori sort of hashtag to kind of open up this, hopefully what is a treasure chest and not a trash can of of ideas and alternative perspectives. My Ustad Nasiruddin Sami, who I studied music with for many years, one of the wonderful lessons that he imparted to me over the years was, don't rely on words to express everything. In Urdu, he would say, कुछ ऐसे मकामात हैं जहाँ ज़बान साथ नहीं देती, right? So learn to also revel in the ineffable pleasures of life. And the perfect cup of chai is one of those ineffable pleasures. There is no amount of wording that can convey to you what makes it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our Narcity channel to see more great content.